With all the 4 highlights this morning revealed, I hope it gives a complementation to all the powerful breakfast that you are having right now. So I hope you continue to have your breakfast and we shall convene a little while later.
Bagus, kau cari siapa ni?
Ni ada mic.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, a little interruption from me again in front, but this interruption complements with the breakfast that you are having right now. We have our distinguished guests as what we have been introduced by Dr. Rezal Khairi Ahmad. We have spoken personally with Professor Suhail and also Professor Ivana. It was a lovely talk just now, but it was just a short, brief one between you and me. But I look forward.
Okay, thank you, Thomas. I think I'll take it from here. So now is the time for us to pretty much get a better idea about the reason why we are being here. Today's session is called Power Breakfast. So Power Breakfast stands for something. It is a powerful congregation of the CEOs and the Director Generals, and of course, culminated by our President or Prime Minister. Yeah. Okay, sure. Okay, sure. So the first talk by Professor Suhail Innayatullah will cover concept of future studies. That is correct. Yeah. Thank you, Dato'. So future studies in this context is very critical for us to understand how a country can move forward. It contextualizes the right or the correct framework. So without much further ado, I shall pass the baton to Professor Suhail.
On 3 now.
Yeah, please do. Yeah. This is a very informal session, so keep it relaxed. And the mic should work.
Thanks for being here. I know you want to eat, and I know you want to talk to your friends, so I know I'm in the way. So let me try to, I'll go for around 15 minutes, and I hope to talk to you about what's foresight, what's futures thinking, and I hope it's actually relevant to you. And I don't have a clicker, so this is very hard for me, so I'm not sure who I talk to. So do I raise my hand? Okay, how is this? Left hand means go forward, right hand means dance in a circle. So if you're doing futures, most people think about futures as forecasting or seeing your psychic. We don't see futures this way. Futures as we see it is a learning journey. It's a hypothesis. And you can't always get the right answer. When you talk about the future, people give lots of data. If you give too much data, they go to zero loop. They can't hear anything. So what we try to do is to get people to think about what's one thing I can do differently. In our work, that's called single loop learning. Now, single loop learning works very well. Your head of finance, head of accounting, innovation is happy. It only works up to the point when the world is known. When you hit the unknown world, what happens? For example, just yesterday, the mayor of New York signed an agreement for 50,000 Google taxis. So unmanned Google taxis will become the norm in New York City very soon. So say you're a taxi driver, what happens to you? You're going to show up in the morning and compete with a robotic taxi driver. So what do you do when suddenly the world changes? So to work on that, we go to something called narrative. Narrative is the metaphor, the story. How do you see the future? That becomes the vehicle from forecasting to changing. Now the challenge of doing futures is most of us think we're doing objective work. Our forecasting is accurate. But almost all of us are seeing the future from our own lens. So we have to think, how is the way I'm thinking, how am I complicit? Is my subjectivity, my biases, how are they influencing the future? Now we're also here to change the world. Science and technology always links with innovation. If you see from this image, the person, he's painting a picture of someone dying. We're not here to observe objectively, we're also here to make a difference. So I try to see the future not just as how many robots will we have in 2050. We know by 2050 probably one of our ministers will be a robot. I'm not sure which one. But we know more and more technology will replace humans in almost everything. My accountant, I went to see him a week ago, my tax accountant, and he said, it's 2015, I know in 10 years I'll be unemployed. I said, why? They said, why do you need a head of finance? Why do you need an accountant for what a good robot system can do? So he says, I know in 10 years I'll be jobless. I know in 10 years most professions will be jobless, so we have to learn new skills. So he was seeing the future as an asset to do something else. Now to do this well, you have to disturb. You can't tell people things they already know. You have to challenge the core assumptions. So is Malaysia in the south? Malaysia is in the north. You have to look at the map and challenge it. Most of us are used to doing things the same way we always doing them. So we always have opening ceremonies. We keep on doing things the way we always done them. Future says challenge it. Of course, when you challenge it, the problem, especially in developed nations, is people go back to conspiracy theory. So if you look in Europe, almost 25% of Europeans believe the sun goes around the earth. Almost 10% of Americans believe that Joan and Noah were married. So the problem is we need good data, even though we also need to challenge. So the method we use is emerging issues analysis, which the main issue is how will the future change. So I'll give you some examples. How might the future change? The first kind of forecast is by 2030, meat as a product will disappear. Been working on this for the last 15 years, and we're seeing more and more, most meat production throughout the world will end, and meat will be done just through tissue cells. The issue for the Islamic world, will cultured meat be halal? You won't need 5 billion animals, you'll need 50,000 animals, that's it. So meat as we've known it in 15 years most likely will disappear. We're also seeing a shift from manufacturing to 3D printing. So the groups we're working on, their forecast in 10, 20 years, most cars will be 3D printed. So they've already invented the first 3D printed car, the first 3D printed house. Those of you who like pizza, there's the first 3D printed pizza. So the forecast by 2040, most Malaysian households will have a 3D printer in their kitchen which will make all your food. That's already invented. Many kitchens are already starting to do that. Now the next part is what's called the quantified self. So every person will know during the day what they should eat, how many calories, do they like their food, and that information will go straight to your doctor. I know there's a diabetes epidemic in Malaysia, so the notion is you can't have this little sugar cake without the bioinformation going to your doctor or your insurance. So the Ministry of Health will have real-time data on every Malaysian in terms of what they eat, how much they exercise. So we already have Fitbit. In 15 years, you'll have real-time quantitative self-information. If you go further, if you're from Ministry of Innovation and Health, we're moving towards the 4P model. Genomics, meditation, prediction, prevention, and it'll be personalized for you. So these are some of the changes we're starting to watch. The biggest challenge for people who produce oil or energy is we're already in the middle of the transition. So already we're shifting from an oil, coal economy to a solar wind economy. So most likely if you own shares or stocks in companies based on coal or oil, any day now they'll collapse. So you're seeing China, India, big markets about to make the major shift. So we're in the final era of the coal oil economy. It may happen tomorrow, it may happen 5 years, it may happen in 10 years, but the last few hundred years, the energy is shifting today. Next one. Now, if you're in that space, how do you change? The old view was very easy. You hire your PhDs and they do your research. GE did something else. GE said, how do we use 8 billion brains to innovate? So GE had a simple question. There's 8 billion people on the planet. Let's use them. So to develop their new engine design, they did crowdsourcing. The person who won was a 21-year-old student from Jakarta. So instead of spending $50 million on your PhDs, they spent a few $1,000s on him. So this is a major shift in how we do science. So all the scientific groups I work with, it's the end of hierarchy, the beginning of what's called peer-to-peer science. Now, it's not just through technology, but through culture. 10 years ago, the Ministry of Education and Technology in Korea said, we've been only measuring GDP. Development is about measuring something called GNC, Gross National Cool. So the coolness index is what % of your innovation money goes to art. They put in a lot of money in it. 10 years later, they get what's it, Gangnam Style? How many people know that song? Okay. So that's not an accident. So there's K-pop. Someone at our meeting at MOSTI, Academy of Sciences, said yesterday, why don't we have M-pop? Now, why is that relevant to the industry? The research is very clear. Every $100 spent on Korean pop leads to $400 of money spent on electronics. There's a direct correlation between culture and money spent on electronics. So the rise of Korea is not just smart technology, but smart culture. So these are the major shifts we're going. The danger for everyone in this room, for myself as well. I used to do something called scanning reports. We would charge $30,000 for every report. There's now a website that does the same report for free. So all of us are in a business that can be disappeared. Kodak is the best example. Does anyone remember Kodak?
Oh, yes.
So Kodak, in 1988, 145,000 employees. And look at Instagram, 13 employees, 30 billion customers. Look at WhatsApp, 55 employees, was just sold for $19 billion. So this is a major shift in the world economy which you've not seen before, the power of a few nodes to destroy old systems. Now, does this work in the real world? That's my next question. Hello? So I want to now give you some images as a way of just saying what I said before. We can go quickly? So our role is not just to look at disruption, but to imagine different futures. If you go back 100 years ago, This was the first imagination of what? Can anyone tell what that is? It's audio, it's video. Oh, I just raised my hand, but that's okay. So that's just a normal raising hand. Okay. Now you don't know what to do. So you go forward. So the first attempt to make this real was in the 1950s with Motorola, Western Electric. They had the technology, but they failed. Then the next attempt, next one. The next attempt was Skype, which succeeded quite dramatically. Then if you go further, what's the future of Skype? If you go further, you get the end of the screen. So most of us still live in the world of screens. That world has already started to end. The step forward is, of course, next one, the first hologramic protest. The Spanish government introduced very tough laws on the right for you to protest. So you know what the protesters did? They send their holograms. So this is the beginning, really, of a rethinking of how you protest, how you do everything. A project we did with ACAPT, which has been leading futures thinking, they said by 2025, every Malaysian professor should be a hologram. If you want to succeed in the new virtual universities, physically, it's dead. Most students don't like physical professors. They prefer holograms. The issue is, will the hologram professor be talking to the hologram student? We don't know. That's a different future. Hologram policeman, exactly.
How about hologram governments? And
Hologram
even
governments.
CEOs.
Now the challenge is, here's the tough challenge. You're the head of the university, head of finance. You get $500 million. Do you put your money in buildings? Or do you put your money in holograms? These are all real issues you have to face. Where do you put your money? Do you put your money in yesterday's future, or do you put your money in tomorrow's possibility? This is something we all face. So let me go further. So the challenge is this zone of control. Some things we can't control, some things we can. 2030, what will the world look like? We're not certain. I've given you some ideas. Tomorrow, you're still going to have the same breakfast. You'll probably still have this. Lots of sugar, probably bad for your heart, make you fat, but it's still delicious. What happens in 10 years from now? That's the zone of MOSTI. You want to influence the world in 2025, 2030, that's your ability to control. So you have to actually make educated guesses. Now the challenge when you do this is he's trying to get to the future. He has a ladder. So you know what he's doing? He's burning the ladder to get to the future. So the assets we have today, we destroy to get out of the cave. That's the challenge we all face. No one is immune. How do I change that? How do I get out of the cave and see the different future without destroying my present? So these become crucial questions. I have a few case studies, but I'll be very quick.
Okay.
One, if you want to do this, there's always a wait. The course we ran this week, everyone said these are great ideas, but Malaysia has too many waits. People say nothing will change in Malaysia. So my question is that true? Can things change here? So one project we did on the knowledge revolution, we tried to bring new technologies in the classroom. The reason why it didn't change, look what happened. You see on the top left the factory. The bottom left, the screen is not so good. It's the school in the factory. So when new technologies come in, what happens? We keep the factory model. So innovation gets destroyed. So what you have to do, we found you have to find out what is preventing innovation. You know what we found out? The biggest prevention of innovation was the Ministry of Education. And this was very tough. The Ministry of Education was paying us, and they were the ones stopping all innovation. So we had leaders in the room, and I said, why don't you allow these new technologies? Let the kids have iPads, iPhones. Let them challenge you. And you know what they told us? But I won't be in charge anymore. I need to be in charge. So this became the big issue. Their story was, I'm in charge. What if the 20-year-old is smarter than me? So we had to help the ministry, the director, the minister to say, in this new world, you don't have to be in charge. They go, what's going to happen to me? I said, we're all learners. We can all be learners. If we're all learners, everyone can take turns being in charge. You can still set the direction. You can still set the vision. You still have an important role. The second thing we did, we redesigned the room. You cannot have the factory if you want innovation. We changed the room design so students felt they could express their creativity. So these are some little things you can do. I have some more cases, but I'm going to stop now. It's breakfast, and I know you want to go back to eat. And so far, you're lucky the Ministry of Health does not have a biometric in terms of everything you're eating. So the next 10 years, eat as much as you can, because soon they'll know everything. Thank you for your time.
Okay. Thank you so much, Professor Suhail. But before you abandon the mic, I have a few things I would like you to touch on. You touched on a lot of the way forward in terms of how we contextualize our mindset. There must be some paradigm shift in order for us to be truly innovative and bringing Malaysia to the next level. And I would like to also you to excogitate, to explain to us laymen in terms of what future study is, the concept. In your fundamentals of your study, you mentioned about the foundational concept, the use future, the disown future, alternative futures, alignment, models of social change, and uses of the future. That is complemented by the 6 pillars: mapping, anticipating, timing, deepening, creating alternatives, and transforming. And that also has the flip side of it. 6 questions: will, fear, missing, alternatives, wish, and next step is related to the future. And how can it be robust enough for it to be applied in various sectors, which is pertinent to today's discussion, which is innovation.
So first the first thing people do is training. So the Academy of Sciences, we had a wonderful 3-day training workshop on Malaysia 2050. So that's part of the process. The second part is not training, but capacity building. So you want many people to be linked thinking about the future. The challenge in Malaysia is you get a wonderful project, Malaysia 2050, Malaysia 2030, but there's no linkage. So different countries have done this differently. In Taiwan, we have 70,000 students who've taken courses on this. So they're good at education, but they don't know how to link to industry. In Singapore, there's a Center for Strategic Foresight in the Prime Minister's office. They're very good at doing this every day. We've trained most of their futurists. The weaknesses, again, is just in the Prime Minister's office. In the US, every corporation is doing this. Forecasting, scenarios, visioning. The weakness in the US is it doesn't influence national public policy. So for Malaysia, it's how do you take these ideas, not one future, many futures, and how do you ensure when you're challenged with the world that's frightening, you don't go back to the factory. The factory was very useful, but not in an innovative era. So you have to find some way to link the foresight projects. Maybe MOSTI can do that. And some way to think not one future, but many futures.
Agreed. But how do we assess ourselves becoming a true embracer of use future? Because we are borrowing other people's future. We are pretty much copy and paste developed countries' template and impose it on us. Should Malaysia embark on creating our own identity, our own future?
Let me give you an example of that. Many universities say we need to be in the top 100 of Financial Times Shanghai ranking, right?
Correct.
So then you do things according to their ranking. The other idea is you create your own ranking system with different values. So a number of universities said, we want to be number 1 to 50 in how green we are. So you create a world ranking of sustainable green universities, then you're no longer copying others, you're innovating where you want to go. So you have to switch how you see the future, and you have to switch from copying to doing something else. Because otherwise you get stuck in the middle income trap, copy paste.
Agreed. But living in this world where Malaysia needs to find its own niche, because rather than going into this David versus Goliath, considering that Malaysia is rather a relatively small economy compared to the likes of the EU economy, the US, etc., etc. So we need to find a niche, and that is underpinned by the concept that we need to understand where we are in the global value chain. So we are interconnected.
Yes.
That is something that we cannot remove. So in a way, there is a mixed package of used and unique future that we have to embrace. What's your take on that?
I'm happy to answer that. My fear is everyone wants to eat.
Okay.
So I think the solution is yes to expert science, but the niche is you have 8 billion people, all potential innovators.
Right.
So it's to develop the capacity of everyone in this country to innovate, along with having leaders, expert scientists to work with them. Okay. So it's both.
All right. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. So you can dance now. You can do your...